Welcome to Shoot the Breeze, a series on a podcast that celebrates the messiness of life, relationships, and Christianity, featuring my wife Lacey and myself, Nathan. It's creatively titled because it will be just us shooting the breeze, sometimes with guests, while occasionally saying something important. We hope you enjoy.
My name is Jason Teague. I'm a dad, a husband. So I'm married with 3 kids.
Okay.
My wife and I have been married. Her name's Jana. We've been married for, oh gosh, she's going to see this later. I'm going to be in trouble. 22 years now, a little over 22. We had our anniversary back in April on the 25th. So yeah, not that long ago. And we've got our oldest child, Schaefer, is, I guess he's about to be a junior. He's a sophomore in college, and he goes to the University of Texas at Austin. Okay. Our second child, Seth, is a recent high school graduate and is working in the 18-plus program with the Burnett Independent School District, kind of their post-high school for special needs folks, because he's autistic. Okay. And then my daughter is 16. Her name is Claire, and yeah. Okay. So that's kind of the nutshell of the family.
How was it, like on the spectrum of autism? How, like, where does he fall?
It's interesting because right about the time that I learned that it's a spectrum, and that, then they said, well, really, it's more like a big kind of blob of, all these different things on there. So, and they said, and these over here are Asperger's, and this over here is kind of classic autism, and blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, he's in this category over here called PDD-NOS, which is Pervasive Development Disorder, not otherwise specified.
Oh, wow.
So, so in other words, it's like, yeah, we know it's autism, but there's not like a neat category to plug him into. Right. He's pretty high functioning in terms of his ability to engage with people. He can communicate. He has trouble sometimes putting his thoughts into sentences. Okay. And math is a completely foreign concept to him. Yeah. Even more so than me. I mean, I'm not a math guy either, but right. But I mean, he still struggles with what might be considered elementary school basics. Okay. I mean, he knows some basic addition, subtraction. Okay. Anyway, but long story short, I mean, he's a great kid. Well, I say kid, he's 18 now, so he's an adult, but he's a great guy, very happy person. One of the most easygoing people you'll ever meet, kind of. And see, that's one of the things about autism. Well, when we first learned that this might be autism, I said to the, I guess she's a special education teacher and now lifelong friend. But at the time, we were still just kind of getting to know her, and we were learning about my son Seth, who was still, I mean, he wasn't a toddler anymore, but he was, pre-K, and she was kind of saying, well, no, we think he might have autism. And I started saying, well, no. And I was thinking in my head the movie Rain Man. Okay. Right. right. And I said, well, classic. but he engages with people. He looks them in the eye. He smiles, and he loves to be hugged. And she said, I hadn't said it, but she said, don't think Rain Man. Yeah. Because it's a much, much bigger field than that, than just kind of one thing. But to that point, my impression of it had been, movies and TV and that sort of thing. And anyway, and there are some areas, where his memory is phenomenal. If I misquote a favorite movie or song of his, he will correct me. That's right. No, Dad, that's not what Toby Mac says in that song. Yeah, anyway.
That's hilarious. I had, my wife had me take an autism test. You could take them online. There's 3 different versions that you could take. Yeah. And I scored higher than normal. So she was like, you have these chicken nugget Thursdays is chicken nugget day, and I'm like, yeah,
it must be chicken nuggets.
It makes sense. And Tuesdays is taco day. I mean, come on. So and then there's it was funny because I was reading some of the questions out loud, and and then I would skip a few, and she's like, well, what ones are you skipping? I'm like, I don't want to tell you the question because then I have to tell you the answer, and the answer is more embarrassing than the question. So no, but basically, I scored in the upper percentile. So it was one of those things where, like I said, I know it's a spectrum. I've never like actually been like, this is an internet test. Sure. But no, it's interesting. You know, my wife has a cousin who's autistic. We have some really good friends of ours. Both their sons kind of landed on the spectrum, and so one of those things that we're familiar with. Yeah. To an extent. Well,
and you saying that is really interesting because when we again began to learn about it and they started talking about some of the hallmark characteristics like texture issues, I'm like, because one of the things that kind of sort of tipped the alert for this special education teacher that we know, her name's Shannon. Shannon said, she said, I noticed that when a bag got caught in a fence and started blowing in the wind and kind of going like that he just stuck his hands on his ears and started screaming. And that's a texture issue or well, not texture, it's a sensory issue. Yeah, sensory issue, yeah. And then she started talking about texture issues in addition to that. And it's funny because not only do I remember especially as a kid having real issues with certain textures like the touch and feel of cardboard or the feel of pencil on a paper, which may be one of the reasons I don't like that. but it's funny because then we realized later that that my daughter also has that. And, she's considered full on neurotypical but yet she just, it drives her nuts. Like if I rub my hands together or something like that, or God forbid my feet, she just loses her mind.
Have you ever heard of the thing where it's specifically with cotton balls that people can't?
I don't like the feel of them at all. No, I didn't know it was a thing.
No, it's a thing.
Is it?
Oh, it's a thing. So there's
certain fabrics that like bedspreads and stuff, some of them are made out of them. Like, I feel it snag my fingers and it drives me nuts.
Okay, so we have a friend who she can't do she has to have her husband open up the
like pill bottles and stuff.
Bottles because of the cotton thing. She's like, I can't do cotton. I can't the cotton ball.
I just learned how to deal with it. That was my my coping strategy. Was like, just do it. And so I just got
put
used
rubber
to
gloves on it.
That's right. I don't know. That might make it worse in some ways.
So, oh goodness, I have so many thoughts on this this line of thinking. Right,
it's totally not what we thought we were going to talk about.
So my wife's aunt. What she did is, because her son has autism, she taught him math and geography because he was so in love with football, sports teams. So they would watch the game and do math, and then they would do geography based on where sports teams were placed. I'm like, man, that is genius. Finding the thing that her son can latch onto and get, and then be like, okay, we're gonna. That's in Georgia, or whatever it is. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so husband, father. What? So what do you do? Who are you? What is your What is your occupation?
I'm a pastor, and it's written right here on my shirt. But yeah, no, I'm a pastor. So I'm the pastor of First United Methodist Church here in Burnett, and we talked some before about my calling into ministry, and for me it wasn't just a calling into ministry. It was like a calling on my entire life. And I know, we say, well, of course, calling into ministry is a calling on your entire life. But what I mean by that is it was something that made a claim on me. Not only God wasn't just making a claim on me, professionally and in terms of like I shared with you before, my whole lifestyle, and then I was also feeling at the same time I was thinking about and I was somebody who was raised in the church. Yeah, you'll hear people say, well, you can't, you're not born with faith, and that is true. And yes, there was a point at which I kind of made that intentional decision. Because I was, quite frankly, I was afraid of hell.
Yeah.
And which is not a bad. I mean, people just really kind of poo-poo that these days.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's a bad place to start. In fact, I think that proverb, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." I think that's maybe something like what that's.
It's somewhere in there.
Yeah, it's somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So anyway, I accepted Christ. I think it was about 14, 13 years old, somewhere in that neighborhood. And not long after that, around the same time, one of the pastors at my church, who had also done kind of a interim youth director position as part of her ministry there, and in addition, she's my best friend's mom from growing up. She's suggested to me that maybe I was called to ministry, and I think the words she used were, "You have, I think, the gifts and graces that you might be a pastor someday." And I just, her son and I had this thing where we'd say when somebody says something nuts, just smile and nod. Just, don't agree or disagree, just smile and nod. So we'll shout out to Todd there in case he ever should watch this. He should remember saying that. So I smiled and I nodded. And kind of, filed that away under, one of those crazy things that older people say to young people like me. And anyway, kind of went on through the rest of my life. And, that relationship with Christ that I started there when I first said yes. And like I said, I think at that point kind of buying the fire insurance. I was really becoming convinced, as many of us do at that age, that I can't be good enough to get into heaven. I just knew it. And then also becoming aware that not only can I not be good enough, there's no way to make up for the evil you've already done, kind of thing. And that was really heavy on my heart and soul. So,
was this back in the 80s?
Yes.
80s? Yeah. Okay. So back then, and you've seen this in church history. There's like these epochs of time that back in the 80s, all the way back to the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But so my dad was a pastor, and I collected Chick tracts.
Oh yeah.
And then I also collected the comic series.
Okay.
The comics.
Yeah.
I have a whole stack of
nice.
Chick tract comics. Anyways, that's your story reminds me of those. Of those.
Yeah. I don't think I would have put it in the terms that I just did.
Sure,
I'm now looking at this through the lens of a pastor with all of the correct churchy language. But back then I was just like, how do I not go to hell? And,
right.
And what the question I asked was, well, how do I get to heaven?
And that was a huge focus back then, was making sure you didn't go to hell. Right. And I think all of these epochs of time serve their purpose and have truth in them. But I think we're coming to an age, and you may disagree, I don't know, but I think we're coming to an age where the heart of the Father is now coming through, whereas before it was more that, like what you're saying, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, right? And I think we do that in our life. Like we move from fear of the Lord as the beginning of wisdom to there's no fear in love. Right.
Because fear may be the beginning of wisdom, but it's not the end of it.
No.
It's not the fulfillment of it.
Right. But I think there's also
perfect love casts out fear. Right. Jesus said that.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and I think that we also see this throughout history, that there was a movement based on maybe more the fear of God, and then now there's more of there's a loving Father. Yep. And anyways, if I were to get up in the pulpit one Sunday and make an evangelistic presentation based on some of the things that I was hearing at that time, that you're going to hell, then that probably people just whatever they walk out or whatever. So anyway, I at that point, I the way I remember it being explained to me, and this was at a youth retreat out at Enchanted Rock with our youth group that I was in at the time, and he said, well,
unfortunately, there's nothing you can do to get into heaven. I'm like, great.
Well, thanks for that sermon. I'm going to go now.
He goes, but there's good news. You know,
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
gospel, right?
Yeah.
He said, it's getting into heaven is about what's been done for you already. And I was like, oh, okay. And he said it was more about, and of course, they were teaching us how to repel. And this was on purpose. I mean, I'm sure that this was the intent, because they had like papers ready for me to sign after that. I accepted Christ on this date and all these other things.
Yeah.
But beyond the kind of
like an actual insurance policy.
Yeah, that's right. Thankfully, there wasn't a payment plan because again, the debt's been paid, right? So, and I hate to be making light of it, but because. I mean, it is kind of funny in some ways, but the fact of the matter is they were teaching us repelling as an analogy for faith, which really wasn't bad, because at first it doesn't make sense. You're supposed to back over a cliff with nothing but this rope anchored to these rocks up here, which, you know, and your desire is to hang on to the rope in front of you.
Right.
Whereas what you're supposed to do is lean back and grab behind you so that you can. Sorry, I'm leaning away from the mic.
But right into the small of your back.
Right. And keep it back here, and you manage the tension on that. Well, you manage your descent by adjusting the tension on that rope, and it doesn't make sense. And then if you mess up, there's a guy at the bottom, the belayer, who's going to pull that rope tight and keep you from falling. So we might mess up, and there might be consequences for that mistake.
Sure.
But ultimately, we're not going to die in the pit down at the bottom. So, I mean, it made a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
And him explaining that, I mean, that stuck with me the rest of my life. I mean, I don't go rappelling very much anymore. I mean, if I got the chance, I might. But that analogy of life with Christ, and then of course the more you practice and the more you do it, the more you begin to enjoy the journey and begin to kind of do some of the things that I guess you'd call tricks or so forth, where you kind of bounce against the wall and then flip around and all that sort of stuff and have fun like the instructors looked like they were.
Did you ever go upside down?
You mean like go face down?
Belay. No. Belay. So once you're going down, and then kind of kick your feet up. And do Spider-Man style?
I mean, I don't know that I would have called it Spider-Man style.
Well, he's like upside down and...
Yeah. Yes. But what really tested us, though, once we kind of learned how to do it, was they sent us over. It was we weren't belaying at all.
Okay.
But going over forward, like you're walking forward. Down
yeah. Okay.
And
so you're holding on,
kind
of like at your belly button or whatever.
Well, they were actually belaying us down, so we had no control.
Got it.
Okay. So it was a real trust exercise.
Yeah.
Like, we've only known us for half of this weekend, right? You're looking straight down to the ground. And, that
Did you get your salvation papers? Okay, let's do this.
Right,
You're moving on, Jason. You have a new...
Yeah, that's right. So if you fall, it's okay. If you die,
unless you
signed the papers.
Unless you become a quadriplegic or something.
That's right.
Joni Eareckson taught it or something.
Yeah.
I don't know if that joke is funny.
Well, yeah. I don't know. I mean, yes, I get it, but yeah, you're right. It may have been...
it's not the worst thing I've said. Okay. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. This is one of the many resources we make available for free at our website, cultivaterelationships.com. Our resources have helped people grow in their relationship with God and others. We've seen people set free from uncontrollable anger and paralyzing fear. We've witnessed estranged family members be reunited after working through our Freedom Booklet. We've helped people build healthy relationship and coping habits through our coaching videos. And all of these resources are made available for free because of the generous support of people like you. If you would like to become a partner, please visit cultivaterelationships.com/support. Now, I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. We worked with a ministry that was a traveling ministry. We would go around and we did conferences for parents and teens. Mm-hmm. But also part of this is we would travel to, it drove everywhere. So one of the trips, some of it was back up to Alaska, down here in the lower 48. We stopped at Glacier National and did some rock climbing, roping, and stuff like that. Okay. And my friend Ben, he's this massive wrestler, right? Big boy, but he's terrified of heights. terrified. And I have I have this odd lack of respect for heights. Like, I'm just like, let's do this, So I
signed the paper.
Exactly, basically, yeah. And so we're off this cliff. It's about I would say 100-foot, 150-foot cliff that we were rappelling back off of, and then we would rappel down, so no belaying.
Oh wow!
But then to get back up, you'd have a few guys up top, and we would pull. So Ben, it's his turn. A couple other ladies that were traveling with us had already done it, so he's like inching, like you're saying, inching back,
right.
kind of leaning back. Well, he kind of gets to about a 45 degree off the cliff. So like if he lets go, he's off the cliff, like done. So he like kind of like freaks out for a second, and I'm leaning back too. Whoops. But like he freaks out for a second and like releases and grabs up in front of you, which then you have no like tension to right,
and you're wear out in a hurry. Yeah.
Exactly, and you're just holding on. So he like freaks out while he slams against the wall of this cliff, and we're like, Ben, pull that rope behind you. Like, you've got to get it back under you. And he didn't die.
Thankfully.
He never did rappel with us again, but he would be our anchor. So, because like I said, he's like 250 easy, 280 maybe. And so he would be our anchor. And so we would tie off on him off of a tree. So that way he's not bearing the brunt of it, but it would be like rounded off, pulleyed off of a tree, and then he would be the anchor tied off of him. Anyways, that was so many...
Yeah, I figured he didn't die because you wouldn't have been laughing about the story.
Exactly. Well, you would hope. Yeah. Okay, so you get...
I am still getting to know you.
I know. Well, good luck. That's right. This is like our second conversation ever.
Well, maybe third, but yeah, second.
No, the first one was like, "Hi, I'm Jason.
Hi, nice to meet you." You're right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Here's my book.
Yeah. So, okay, so you're 14, 15, or 13, 14. You accept Jesus.
Right.
Fire insurance.
Okay. Yes. So it would be great if I could say, well, I don't know, would it... Yeah. Ultimately, I guess, it would have been great if I could have said, and from that moment on, I followed Jesus closely for the rest of my life.
Right.
But as is the case, with so many of us during my, like college years, well, even really in high school, I began to kind of... not really walk away as much as drift away.
Yeah.
I never rejected the faith, but there was, and into my young adult years following college, and I had all kinds of crises during college. Sure. As far as self-made. I mean, messes I got myself into that caused me to not finish school. My first college, my undergraduate degree in the first attempt.
Okay.
I started out at the University of Texas and did not finish there. I got into my almost my junior year and had to finish up at Angelo State, which was great. It was a wonderful school, and in a lot of ways, I didn't really find. This is a side note. The coursework wasn't any easier, but with smaller class sizes and more access to instructors, and then not only that, once I got into the upper division stuff, which is more in my field of study, then you're like, well, I don't mind studying this so much. Right.
Well, and it was more like an interest. To you,
exactly. Things that were interesting to me. Anyway, so I did finally get finished with that, and I kind of had to relearn how to study because part of my profile is, when I was in high school, there were a lot of things that came easily for me or came easily enough that I didn't have to study hard.
Right.
So I really didn't know. I mean, I wasn't an A student in high school, but I probably could have been. I used to always hear the words apply yourself and potential pretty regularly throughout my academic.
You have potential.
Yeah.
If you would just apply yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, you've heard these words too.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. I bet there's a lot of people who have.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but anyway, so I finally, once I did really learn how to open the books and showing up regularly to class when in high school you have to go to class. I mean, if you don't, there's like legal trouble. But in college, it's more that discipline's up to you. Anyway, finally,
you just pay for it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yes, and you can pay for it double when you get kicked out of school and have to get yourself back in. So I got my degree in communications and in public relations specifically, and I started and I had to, and this is, I don't want to get off on this sidetrack, but I was engaged, or I got engaged to this girl that I'd been dating for, all total about 7 years, and we almost got married, and her family had a business, and I was going to go with them into that business. Well, when we broke up, that created not just a personal crisis, but a career crisis. So I started looking for work, and with my PR degree, not only are there surprisingly few, or were surprisingly few, now there's even fewer. I've found out that's one of those that, you get your liberal arts degree and there's no jobs out there.
Right.
And it wasn't as bad then, but when you hadn't even done, I didn't do an internship, because why did I need to do an internship? I was going to go into the family business with my fiance's family. And anyway, so that didn't pan out, obviously. So I started looking for whatever job would pay the bills. So I did, a couple of different things, worked retail, management training, worked for a rental car company, and, and kind of wandered from job to job. And it wasn't so. Oh, and I ended up at a computer company as well. I don't know. Should I mention the names of these companies or not?
They're not paying. They're not paying.
Yeah, these are not paid advertisements.
No.
And we're not slamming them either. But I was working at Dell Computer. And that's kind of relevant to people in our area, because at the time Dell was growing mad crazy. I mean, it was just. It seemed like there was no end in sight to the success. Anyway, at each of these jobs that I'd had up until that point, including, I did a job change there because I'm not a good computer salesman.
Yeah.
But I did believe in the product, and they transitioned me over into technical support, and I found a lot more success there. So in all of these jobs leading up to that, I could do the jobs, and I could do well enough at them. Well, with the exception of the sales position.
Well, didn't they transfer you to customer service because you were really good at listening to people's needs?
Yeah, because as I was being kind of admonished for having really low sales numbers, they also took note of the fact that I had highest margin per sale. I actually won an award as I was being transitioned out of the sales department, because the computers that I did sell came out loaded, because what I was doing was I was listening to what the customer was wanting to do with the computer, instead of just boom, boom, boom.
Which is a revolutionary thought.
Yeah, I know. But the guys that really succeeded in terms of, they were churning and burning. They could get from call to call. And let me also say this, because I don't want to slam everybody who did well there either. I also had issues with rejection.
Okay.
So when someone didn't buy a computer from me, it took me a long time to get to the next call.
Okay.
And there's all this documentation they wanted us to write down, and that took me a long time. And I think that was made worse by the fact that I was like, another phone call. I just spent 30 minutes with this person, and they didn't buy a computer.
Right.
But when they did go out the door, I'd listen to the customers, and so they went out the door fully loaded. And and by the way, and when a customer would ask me a question, does this computer do this, or is it compatible with that? I'd go find out.
Sure.
That was another thing that ate up time.
Yeah.
So that meant that I learned a whole bunch of stuff about these computers. So they're like, you have a choice between customer service and tech support. And I'm like, well, since I know these computers backwards and forwards now, I think I'll go with the tech support route.
Yeah.
So I moved over there, and then I began to have some success there. And I really derived a lot of satisfaction from getting to the end of a call, or when I transitioned into online support, an email thread, and I've solved the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved that.
Yeah.
That lit me up.
Right.
Anyway, and this is the weird thing, because I'd wandered from job to job, kind of dissatisfied with what I was doing. And it was at the point that I really realized that, I'm having some success here and things are going well. And then they started offering stock options, which at the time seemed like a really good thing.
Right, because at the time Dell was like...
Stock was just going up and up and up. And so they offered like 200 stock options or something like that if you would stay with the company for more than 5 years. Then at the end of that 5 years, you could then have these options that would exercise the stock price. You could buy stock at the price that it was 5 years ago.
Right.
Which probably even with the downturn that happened after that still would have been a great deal. So anyway, long story short, it was at that point, and maybe this is also one of the reasons I was having more success at work. God was reordering my life, and I was really intentionally drawing near drawing back to my faith roots and to, living out that decision I'd made 15, 16, 17 years before.
Right.
When there was this weird kind of dissatisfaction with the way that I was living my life. And as a man in my 20s at that point, I was kind of going, one of the things I realized was not only was I feeling this call, discerning this call to professional ministry, there was this weird desire in my heart to be a husband and a father.
Yeah.
Okay. And that doesn't seem weird to me at all now, but at the time,
but
I was
with your friend group at the time,
I didn't want to talk to my buddies about this. It's what are we gonna go out and do after work, kind of thing. It's
let's talk about marriage and kids.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, next time we'll call you. Okay?
Yeah. Hey, Jason, why don't you just wait for our text, okay?
Yeah. Well, I don't think we were texting yet.
Oh, it would have been phone
so
call. We'll page you.
Yeah, that's right. We'll page you. Let's see. I did have my first cell phone, but I don't think it had text messaging yet. But anyway, that was more like when I was in seminary.
Right.
I kind of dipped my toe in the water. Is this the stuff I really wanted to study? So I kind of went to seminary part-time to start with, and I was like, oh wow, this is crazy. And around that same time, I had met Jana, who would later become my wife, and it was amazing because I'd been with a woman for 7 years, and we got engaged at year 6.
Yeah.
And we still, we're like, wow, we really would have made a mess of things if we'd gotten married. Well, then I meet Jana, and we started dating, and we were engaged in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And I remembered thinking at the time, my mom's going to think I'm insane because I went and told my mother, even actually before we even really went on that, I asked her on a date, but we'd met each other at church and we'd started talking and we're like, gosh, we come from the same places. So anyway, and so I kind of was thinking in my heart, this could be the one before I'd even gone on that first date with her, just because we'd been talking at church and stuff, and her background and my background just kind of matched up. And I said something to my mom about it. I said, I think I've found the woman that I'm going to marry. And I remembered thinking, this is going to throw her over the edge. And there was almost kind of a little bit of a rebellious streak in me going, let's see what she does now.
Yeah, exactly.
And she goes, oh, that's wonderful. I'm like, wow, that was disappointing.
I wanted more rebellion.
Yeah, that's right. I thought she would flip her lid, Anyway, but no, she was happy. And and that was it. She hadn't met her. She didn't know who she was. I don't think she even knew her name at that point.
That's funny.
And anyway, but it was wild. And in the middle of all of this too, there was I had an aunt, my mom's half sister, who was really, really special to me, and she was old enough. She was enough older than my mother to where she was kind of like a grandmother to me.
Okay.
And she was. So she was in her 90s around the time this was happening, and she had gotten real ill, was declining, and the time was kind of short. Well, meanwhile, while I'm praying over this stuff that I don't want to talk to my buddies about, ministry, and
family.
I do remember broaching the topic of going into professional ministry as a pastor to one of my friends, and he just thought I was nuts. And that was kind of the end of those conversations.
When you were a kid, so someone had said, hey, you would make a good pastor. But through all of these years, did you feel like you were being called into ministry and you were more avoiding it?
Yeah, it was. I was running from it. I was, well, I don't know if running from it is the right term. It's more like I was kind of subduing that voice.
Okay.
I had, and in a lot of ways, I think, I was living my life in a way that I knew didn't match up with what I really believed. And, and
not necessarily that you were actively
I don't think I was intentionally or consciously doing this, but I think a lot of the things I was doing was to kind of self-medicate that away from
me. What do you think your apprehension was?
Well, I remember when I was first confronted with this idea by this pastor, Judith is her name. When I know her as Judy though, because like I said, well, as at that time Mrs. Calvert. Anyway, she's remarried now. Her name is Sellers, but I would, it was Todd's mom. So I was like, hey, when she said that, I was like, I wanted to say, hey, Todd's mom, you pastors, it doesn't look like you have much fun. And of course, I say that, and hanging out at her house was one of the most fun things. With her son. That I had fun with them. But in my mind, I had this kind of cultural impression of pastors, this kind of stuffy, boring.
Yeah.
Never.
Well, I mean, they all preached about hell and stuff.
That's right. They were all telling me I was going to burn. So.
I don't want to do that for other people.
There were a lot of caricatures in my head.
For sure.
And of course, the 80s gave us also the televangelist scandals and things like that.
So much good TV.
Yeah, it was great comedic material too. So you'd see it lampooned on Saturday Night Live or whatever.
Oh goodness.
And so I think that was a big part of it. Is like it didn't seem fun to me at the time, and so I was trying to do all the things that I thought of as fun, and a lot of those things just proved to be empty, and meaningless. So anyway, when I really did, kind of came to this point of a feeling of dissatisfaction, and I think God put some people in my life at the right moments, and actually even brought some people back into my life from the past.
Okay.
One had been one of the friends that I ran around with and got in trouble with as a youth, and he sort of popped back into my life rather unexpectedly. And it's funny, he invited me to join him at his church one weekend. This guy's name is Rob, and Rob invited me to join him at his church one weekend. And he didn't invite me to church. He said, "Come up, let's spend the weekend up in Waco," where he lived at the time. And I thought, oh man, okay, cool. Well, I don't know if there's much of a nightlife in Waco, but okay, let's go check it out. Right? There's a college there. Yeah. So I went up there with him, and Saturday night rolls around. And he's like, "Hey man, let's go to Bible study." I'm like, "What? Where did you what on Saturday night?" Yeah. But at this point, I'm his guest. I'm kind of a captive audience. He drove me from Austin up to Waco. Anyway, so we go to this Bible study, and I kind of, okay, yeah, this is good. And I actually engaged really with what we were talking about that night. And then next day I went to worship with him, and when the altar call went out at this church. And this was a full-on Pentecostal, and I'm not embracing or rejecting anything that was going on there necessarily, but there was like people being slain in the Spirit and stuff like that.
Condone or endorse, nor do you deny and reject.
That's right. Yeah. But I know that what happened for me that day was, all that stuff was kind of coming to a head. Oh, yeah. And, let me finish this story, and then I'll go back to the story of my aunt. We're kind of all over the place, shooting the breeze, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I find myself during that altar call, and I mean, really, I was like, I don't remember walking up there. Okay. But all of a sudden, it's like I'm at the altar, and there's this one of the guys on their prayer team. He's like, "Hey, man, what can I pray with you?" He's like, "You ready to accept Jesus?" And I said, actually, I've already done that, but I've kind of walked away from it or drifted away from it. And I told him, much shorter than what we've done here, that I needed to rededicate my life to Christ. And I was like, "Let's do it, man." So he started praying with me, and it was this powerful moment. And then I just start really coming back confronted with that. Jason, you may have the gifts and graces to be a pastor. Like, wow, okay. Well, I need to be absolutely sure that this is real, this is true, that it's really God speaking to me, that it's not me just getting caught up in a moment,
right?
Or whatever it is.
So when you were a kid, your apprehension was pastors are boring and stuffy.
Right.
So now you're in your 20s?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Mid to late, 26, 27.
Okay. So what would have been your apprehensions at that time? And maybe you didn't have them, but you're just kind of that reluctance.
Okay, so there's like I told you where I was professionally.
Right.
I was actually finally having some real success in my career. I mean, I had not really been unsuccessful, but I hadn't stayed anywhere long enough to really succeed because I would get dissatisfied with what I was doing. I'd start looking for the next biggest paycheck. So that's when I would switch jobs. I would just start sending out the resumes and finally there I'd been at Dell for about 3 years at this point. Okay.
Transitioned into
tech support, and not only tech support but online support, and they even put me in this pilot program working with the hearing impaired, and it was again, it's like, man, I'm helping people, right?
And so you're successful at this,
and I'm successful at this, and really enjoying it, being blessed by it. I liked the people I worked with, so I'm praying about this, and I'm keeping it mostly to myself. Like I said, I mentioned it to one friend back when I was the job before that, when I was still at the rental car company, Enterprise Rent a Car, and about the idea of being, called into ministry.
Yeah.
And he just, whatever, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Anyway, dude, don't do that. He's like, really? And he was like, and the reason I'd talked to him was because I knew he was involved in his family's church life. That they were very committed to their church and so forth. And now I don't know that he personally was, but he had a background that I knew this background. Anyway, and he advised me against it, or at least maybe he was just telling me, be sure that this is really what, So I was trying to be sure. So I'm praying about this, and I'm praying, this is an incredibly deep theological prayer. Lord, make it so plain that an idiot can understand.
I love
Not saying anything about myself, Lord, but, make it so plain that an idiot can understand. I was looking for that lightning bolt out of the blue.
Yeah, but how many of us, if we were to be real, we're not like going, oh God, explain to us the mechanics of the universe. It's literally like,
oh thou Lord,
cause
me to understand more clearly.
And it's James Earl Jones who responds. But
I'd have to go deeper.
I know I can't even. But it's those real prayers in the moment going. It's like a couple days ago, I literally just wrote in my journal, God, I need your help. Like it was this one situation where it's just like, okay, I need help. Like, right? It's that simple, basic prayer. Make it simple that an idiot can. Right.
And my big reluctance there, because you asked this question maybe about 5 minutes ago, but my big reluctance at that point was career-wise.
Yeah.
I had a good job.
Yep.
I didn't want to lose it.
It was secure.
Predictable. Yes. Very. And I felt like I was doing good work.
Sure.
So that's the other thing. This is like, it wasn't like I was, well, I don't want to get into different professions, but it wasn't like I was, selling drugs,
right,
or human trafficking. Those was
professions.
I was, I don't remember that one being, on the school counselor's list when I was in high school. But
you're like, I don't want to disparage any professions.
Wow, look at your profile. So, I picked some that are easy to disparage.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
Those are just, obviously wrong.
You didn't want to be a stripper.
No, didn't want to be a stripper. No. Didn't want to sell porn or drugs. Okay.
Sure.
So I'm praying this prayer, and so God had been reordering my life, but at this point, this was a deep level reordering. Do I have the trust to know that God's still going to provide for me materially during this time?
Sure.
And I'm sure, you're technically a missionary, right?
Yeah.
So you know about raising funds and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That takes a supreme act of trust to say, you know what? I'm just going to trust that God's going to get to these people's hearts and cause them to fund the ministry that I'm doing, and I'm going to feel good about asking them for money.
Right. Well, and we've walked long enough as missionaries now. We've lived long enough as missionaries that there's faith for the ask. Yeah. Hey, I'm just going to, hey, will you support our ministry? And then there's also faith for not asking. It's like, man, I really feel like looking at my bank account, we should ask again. Yeah. And God's like, no. That's not the season you're in, right? And so it's faith for both seasons, right? I'm tracking.
It's different for pastors, but there's similarities, and faith for the ask. As pastor, I'm the chief fundraiser for the church. Thankfully, I have the help of the finance committee. Yeah, you probably don't have that blessing.
It's me and my wife.
Right.
So, we are the finance committee.
That's right. So I'm praying that prayer, and I have these reluctances, this idea that, I like my job, it's going well, and then the resources, what's going to happen financially. So like I said, I put it in God's hands, and although I don't think I would have used that language back then, but I was like, make it clear. I need to know this is from you, Lord. Right. And so my aunt, like I said, was on her deathbed, and she was we got that phone call that it's going to be short. So she's asking for the family. So we all come home. She didn't have any kids of her own. And so we were kind of like surrogate children. Like I said, she was like surrogate grandparent for me.
Sure.
Because my own grandparents had all passed away when I was fairly young. Some of them actually before I was born, both my grandfathers. So she was the grandparent figure in my life for a long time. And so when we're there at her bedside, she kind of talked to each one of us that were there. And then she kind of motioned me close and she said, "You're going into the ministry, aren't you?" No. My response was real profound, like, I guess so. But it was like, because that was the question I'm asking.
Yeah.
Is this what I'm supposed to do? Is this where God's really calling me to be? Because I didn't want to go into something that I thought was God and then find out later that it wasn't.
Sure.
But
because God forbid he calls you into ministry.
Right. Yeah. Those boring old stuffy pastors never have any fun, don't make any money. Anyway, so and it's it's amazing too because I've had lots of fun as a pastor.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just the journey's been amazing and
awesome.
And I'm so glad that I did and it was so easy to wander away from that. And there are times when I'm not saying that there's not rough spots.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's been times when I just wanted to say, maybe I got it wrong. I don't want to say you got it wrong,
right.
But maybe I wasn't hearing so clearly. But every time when I get there, I double down on prayer and that always God's like okay, there may be a course adjustment here.
Sure.
God may need to do some pruning on me there.
Right.
But sooner or later. I kind of come to a place, and usually sooner rather than later, come to a place where I'm like, okay, yeah, God's still in this. He's still calling me forward.
Yeah.
And anyway, so yeah.
What would you say? So like so you've had this journey. You're obviously a pastor. How long have you been a pastor now?
Gosh, I can't believe it's been like 20 years now.
Oof.
20 years.
So you've walked in professional ministry, full-time ministry. The cliche, we're all ministers. We're all ministers.
And that's true. We don't want to be too dismissive of that.
No.
I would hate to do ministry by myself without a congregation.
Right. No, absolutely. No, but what have you seen, and you were telling me the other day how you've, just in your denomination, you get moved and transitioned for various reasons.
And that's hard.
Right. And so, in some you go to a congregation where it's like, you want to quote Jesus, how long do I put up with you? But then others, you go into that congregation, and you're like, man, this is fantastic. Of course, there's things that need to be worked out. But in your journey, and I think maybe what I want to focus on with your story that you've told so far is like, how do you get through seasons where you're like, man, God, did I hear you right? Like, and that could be because a congregation you're dealing with issues within the congregation, or the organization you've submitted yourself to is like, okay, Jason, we're moving you, and you're like, no, this is great. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah. Well, I've already mentioned doubling down on prayer.
Yeah.
And first and foremost, I think that's the number one thing you can do. But I also think far too often we try to do this alone.
Yeah.
And I know that when I'm with Jesus, I'm never alone, but
he's also given us people.
Yes, he has. I mean, because kind of along the lines of what you're saying, you want to quote Jesus, how long will I contend with this generation, right? How long will I contend with this congregation or this system that I exist in?
Yeah, sure.
I could preach a whole sermon on that. So, but
we do have teaching episodes if you want to.
And see, that's the thing. I might want to do that.
Yeah, there you go.
But that's the thing. It's like God did create us for relationship, not just with Him, but with each other. And that's not just about, the person you choose to spend the rest of your life with. Right. And it's not just about, your kids and your family. It's about the community. And see, this is, by the way, I think one of the great strengths of being a Methodist, of being a United Methodist is our orientation on community. I mean, we're oriented on that individual relationship with Jesus, but we're also oriented on the community. Like when someone gets baptized in our tradition, and whether as an infant or an adult, and a lot of people have problems with baptizing infants, but And I think there's something real powerful. I mean, we did some immersion baptisms of some youth on Easter, and that's really powerful because the power there is they're making that decision. Of course, what we do is if someone's baptized an infant, when they reach an age where they're ready to make a decision for themselves, they're confirmed. That's also incredibly powerful because that's when they're intentionally saying yes to Jesus. Yeah. Anyway, but where was I going with that? Started.
We'll have a theological discourse later.
That's right. Yeah. But what was the question? We were trying to get to.
Like when you have difficulties. Like
when you have difficulties. Moments like that help. But anytime someone joins the church, is baptized, is confirmed, anytime we take communion, that is a community activity. Yeah. It's it unites us with Christ, but it also unites us with everybody else at the table. Sure. When we're taking, we recognize it as sacrament, communion, Holy Communion, the Lord's Supper. Yeah. When we're doing that, we're there not by ourselves with Jesus, but we're there with all our other sisters and brothers in the faith, all the other disciples he's called to the table, both past and present. Yeah. And so community is incredibly important, and relationships of accountability. And this is, I think, one of the great underutilized strengths of the church. Because the church is God's chosen instrument for the redemption of the world. I mean, it's the body of Christ. So, you don't want to say, I love you, Jesus, but I can't stand your body. Right. I mean, try saying that to your spouse. That ain't going to work. I mean, I know that's a different relationship, but
you are not long for marriage.
Yeah, that's right. You'll be in real trouble in a hurry. So, but I have tried to cultivate in every season of ministry. Every place I've been. I mean, I was welcomed into my first appointment as a pastor. I was welcomed into this group. We called it a lectionary discussion group, and we would talk about what are we going to preach on this week, whether it was lectionary based or not, and then we would pray for each other too. That's awesome. So we'd share our struggles, and we would pray for each other. And then I learned a little farther into ministry to kind of cultivate not only those groups with collegial groups of pastors because we're on a peer footing where we can share with each other deeply, but then also individual relationships. I mean, I've got a pastor friend who's about in the same stage of life where I am. He just turned 50. I'm about to turn 50. And he's married. He's got 2 kids that are close to the same age as where my 3 kids are. So we're walking the same or similar struggles right now. And we're also kind of in a similar place theologically. So because the United Methodist Church, it's no secret we've got a lot of divisive issues, and there's another
things happening.
Yeah. So there's another discussion for another day. But we can but this friend and I, this colleague and I, this brother and I, we can share deeply with each other, and we trust each other enough to where I can tell him stuff and not worry that it's going to become,
a podcast episode.
Yeah, exactly. And he can tell me the same, and he knows that I'm not going to mention. By the way, I'm going to say, what his problems are.
Let me tell you his name.
His name. Yeah. I'm not saying his initials are.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, we can trust each other with it, and it really is. What is it? Proverbs 27 something. Iron sharpens iron, right? So
you have a fantastic memory, like ability to memorize scripture.
Oh man, there's certain ones that I can go to, and there's some that I couldn't tell you chapter or verse, but I think Jesus said it. But yeah.
Donna and I, when we were talking, I told her one of my favorite verses in the Bible is when in Hebrews where it says somewhere in Scripture it says, I'm like, I rely on that so heavily.
Yeah. Well, the internet's great too. When I'm preparing sermons, Google. It's like, where does it? Go into Bible Gateway.
Exactly. Yep.
Start looking them up, and then there's another one. Was it openbible.info?
Oh, okay.
And you can do searches for topics on that one. And it's a little more robust than the Bible Gateway because, you got to be matching exactly the version you're using. Yeah. When you're using Bible Gateway. But if you go to openbible.info, that one has, it'll run a search on topics. Like if you type in sanctification. Or,
and it'll give you
it'll give you a whole bunch of stuff. And you have the opportunity to kind of say, this one worked, this one didn't work. But anyway, that's really helpful in sermon prep.
Nice. Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, so you said, you have a group of people around you that you kind of filter your current whatever circumstances, that you go to them in prayer, ask advice.
In addition to that, I also seek, just as I always want to be pouring into someone, helping mentor someone at any given time, I also want to seek out relationships where someone can mentor me, and I actually engage a coach, someone with a lot more experience in ministry than I have. That he can kind of when we talk, again confidentially, we'll sit down and visit, and I'll just kind of tell him what I'm dealing with, what I want to work on, and then he starts asking me questions to kind of help me find the answers that I already have. Now, that's the coaching model. Now, on the other hand, then sometimes we'll move out of coaching mode, not during our coaching sessions, because I actually pay money for those. And he'll just share with me, Jason, what I did when this happened to me. Then he'll tell me kind of his insight and wisdom.
That's awesome.
Again, with the permission, I don't always have to do exactly what he would have done in the same situation. But honestly, having people around me that I can talk to about things, existing in that community of faith. Both and then in the congregation too, but there's a different trust level there, and there's some things that's really not appropriate to share with like congregation members. But when you kind of go, you get out of yourself,
especially if they're the ones you have an issue with.
Yeah, that's right. I want to tell you about this person who shall remain nameless.
What do you think I should do?
What would you do if you were in my shoes? Right? No. So, but yeah, it kind of what it does, it gets me out of myself a little bit, because you kind of get, when you're in a problem and it feels like the mountain's too high, the walls are all around, all of a sudden it gets you a chance to kind of zoom out on the problem a little bit, and listen to somebody else's perspective. And I'm an external thinker. I don't know if you know,
like maybe a verbal processor, and my wife
talk stuff out. I can't just sit there silently and work through a problem. So sometimes even when I'm praying, it's out loud. It's like if I'm like in the car by myself and nobody's with me, or I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start talking out loud to Jesus and see what comes. Anyway.
I'm more of a deliberative thinker, so I don't talk.
No.
But I have so many. It was funny. I have so many people in my life who are verbal processors. I've had to learn, because I'm like, okay, someone's talking to me. They expect a response and an answer, But I've had to learn. Like my wife, I have a good friend who's, both of them are verbal processors, and so I've had to develop the art of.
It's hard, and that's hard for me too. And I think some of that is, and this is always a broad brush when you say men are this way, but we tend to be fixers. We want to fix the problem in front of us. So when somebody's telling me something, I'm assuming they want me to help them fix it.
Why wouldn't they?
Exactly. No, what they're doing is they're processing, they're venting. They want to know it's safe. They want to know you're listening. So you don't want to just tune them out and that's really interesting, honey.
I already have an answer for you. Let me know when you want it.
Yeah, that's right. Again, kind of like saying I love you, but I can't stand your body.
Yeah, exactly.
Not good for the relationship.
No.
So,
there's a pillow waiting for you tonight.
Enjoy that sofa you're sitting on, because that's where you're sleeping too.
So you, I think, even those who aren't in full-time ministry or anything like that, having a group of people that we can go to, and I think it's first or second Thessalonians, one of those two books. Paul writes and he says, "We've invested in you." And I think one of them is Sylvanus, one of it is like a Timothy or something like that.
You're talking about my scriptural knowledge?
Again, notice I didn't give a passage.
But you're pronouncing the names confidently.
It's one of the, you just say it fast and confident, and that's the key.
And there's probably some scholar who agrees with your
exactly. You just find him and see, he says. But no, in one of these two books, one of these two letters to the Thessalonian church, he says, "Hey, we've invested in you," and I think it's that it's that idea that, listen, I don't have a guru, one person who has all of the answers for everything. It's, hey, I have someone who helps us out financially in our missions. I have another person who, they help us out with theology. We wrote a book. I had a guy help me. He's like, kind of tearing apart my theology, and it was a fantastic journey.
That had to be tough.
It was, it was really
Here,
good.
I'm going to get into your heart and rip it up a little bit and reorder things.
The editor was worse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, but it was great because him and I agreed on a lot of things.
Okay.
I just worded it really horribly and basically was like, I'm right, you're wrong. And he's like, maybe have a little more grace.
Yeah.
But this idea, of people in our lives, and I think it's healthy that we all, again, ministry or not, hey, as a parent, who do you have? As a husband, who can you go to vent your issues? Not that your wife is horrible, but maybe you're just a bad husband.
No, and that's, but ideally, the spouse is the number one accountability partner. However.
No. Yeah. But I think that's the thing where, like you're saying, much like a congregation, there's things that as a husband I want to improve, and maybe my wife, how do you say it? Because I 100% agree with you. My wife's the first one. She knows more than anything. Right. But those times where you have to pull back and be like, I just want to vent. I want
like any other relationship. That's when you want to work on. You don't. Just like if you want to work on your relationship with your congregation, you don't talk to the congregation. I mean, gosh, that sounds terrible. You don't want to talk to your wife when you work on. You do.
It's I know exactly what you're talking about.
I'm like starting to dig a hole. Oh, dear God, please, Jana, don't watch this podcast.
Exactly. No, here's the thing. Above all, just get a bunch of people involved in your life.
Yes.
It's the Proverbs. There's a wisdom within a multitude of counselors, right? And I think you have to weigh that balance of, which is not a Bible verse, too many cooks in the kitchen.
Right. That's not in the Bible?
No. I was going to list off a bunch of...
The Lord helps those who help themselves.
Oh, my goodness.
Not in the Bible.
God never gives you more than what you can handle.
Right.
None of those are Bible verses.
No.
But that weighing that balance between, okay, I have multiple people speaking into my life who I can go to, but then also making sure you're not like opening up a podcast going, I want everyone's thoughts on my life. That neither of those two options
Just put it
healthy.
in the comments today.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead and respond with all of your thoughts about us. No. No, okay. So, I think that's a great thing. I need to wrap up.
Okay.
People are going to start tuning out. If they haven't
Probably
already.
did 20 minutes ago.
Man, Jason, thank you so much. I feel like there's so much more that just in our conversation that we had the other day that we could talk about, and
I hope we do.
Yeah, absolutely. With anyone else, I don't think there's yet anyone I've said, I'll call you. You don't call me.
I'll call you.
Hey Nate, can I get on your podcast?
I'll let you know.
I'll fax you.
I'll fax you.
What other?
We're back to the 90s again.
Yeah, no, right? What other outdated?
Send you a page.
There you go. I'll page you. You don't page me. 911. Oh, that's right. I do. I did have a pager actually.
Yeah. I did briefly. Yeah.
It was back in high school. I had these like medical stuff that I would have. I would get I would page, and I would get paged. Yeah. Really random. Okay. Yeah. Dude, Jason, thank you so much.
You bet.
Really appreciate you chatting with me, and look forward to more times for sure. This would be great. Yeah. Right. Awesome. All right. Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.